I have one thing that stands out to me, and then I have a larger point at the end of this.
Yeah.
So, first iteration, final iteration, the land enters the battlefield untapped.
On both.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's very strange to me.
Finish your thought.
Because I feel like normally there's a backstop on this sort of thing, which is the land enters the battlefield tapped.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you believe that the design is, the initial design is too good in Commander or whatever, and this assumes that the card has been played with a little bit during the FFL, it didn't come to anyone's attention that like, hey, like when my opponent kills this or tries to kill this or tries to kill something of mine, I like target it with fucking terror, and then they hit an untapped land, and then they're like, okay, I'll snakeskin veil it. Just something like that, right? Like some sort of interaction that's like, well, I didn't have any lands, but now I have an untapped land and I'll ephemerate it. So my thing's still alive. Good try. Or you hit an untapped land, so now I can actually, I had one land untapped, and now I can actually cast my counter spell. Like that just never came up. Right? And that's strange to me, because I also think, given the people who are on the play design team and just on those teams in general, which are all very skilled Magic players, it's like, yeah, it's pretty rare that it's okay to get an untapped land effectively for free, because that can lead to bad things.
Yeah, but it's different in the world where the card is predicated on the opponent doing something to you.
Sure.
Then it's very different, right?
Sure.
Then you can make the argument of like, yeah, one game out of 100, I get an untapped forest and protect my thing. That's fun and cool and dramatic.
Sure.
That's how you get with untapped lands.
Okay.
It's obviously not even close to the same thing when you are targeting your own stuff.
Agreed. It just seems a little strange to me that they would want to, and that they would want that was on the original version of the card. And I can't say that no one pointed out and said, I don't think this is a good idea, but clearly it stayed because it moved on to the real version of the card.
I can answer this.
Okay.
I'll give you some insight here.
Okay.
People talked a lot about, because it's said in the article, Nadu went out the door with 0 games played. And people go, how is that possible? Have a card go out the door with 0 games played. And I would argue it's worse than that. This card went out the door with negative games played. By that I mean, you have this iteration cycle of the card being redesigned, and the card remains superficially similar to the original design, but in practice, it's an entirely different thing. And you have this idea in your head of how you want the card to function, what the goals are, whatever, blah, 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 blah. It's the same reason when you are done writing an article or a paper, you want someone else to edit it, because you read your own writing and you know what is supposed to be there.
You know what you're trying to say,
but you don't necessarily catch the typos because your brain is just skipping over the parts that are the typos because you know what you intended to say.
Yep.
So you get to the end of the line, the Nadu that you have in front of you is informed by all the iteration, all the goals that you had, all the reasons that you know why previous versions of it didn't work, et cetera, et cetera. That is harder to catch than if just one day someone put Nadu down on your desk, the finished product, and said, what do you think of this design? They are more likely to catch it in the second world than the first one. So that's why what I mean when I say by they played negative games. It's worse than 0. The well was poisoned by the iteration cycle, what they believed the card was supposed to do and how they wanted it to function, that made it harder to catch it than if they had played no games at all and it was just a design someone put down on their desk.
No, that makes total sense. I mean, that's in the same vein of when someone, as you mentioned, writes an article and then are rereading their own work. But that's why there are like copy editors and editors in place, right? You hand the article to someone for a fresh set of eyes. They reread it and say like, oh, like, I think your messaging is not clear here, or you for a bunch of typos, all this other stuff, catch a bunch of mistakes, right? Back when I was the content coordinator for Star City, the process was, you'd write an article, you'd submit it to me. I would read it over to make sure the content is good, and I would do a little bit of editing of it, and then I'd send it to John Dale Beatty, who was the copy editor, and he would read over it and make sure that the content was good, yes, but that was more so my job, but also just to be the copy editor of it, and then it would go to print. 3 sets of eyes to make sure that what's going out the door is good. Right. No poisoning of the well.
Yeah, and sometimes I would get some feedback from you or from John where you would interpret something that I had written one way and ask me for clarification, and I go, no, I meant something different.
Yeah.
So that it's like good to have that sort of feedback.
Absolutely.
But my point is just the way that people's brains work and the way that design works is this situation is worse than zero games. You are reading the text box. You know what you meant to put down there. You know what the process was and how we got to this spot. And you really just want to fucking move on with your life because you've already spent so many hours on this goddamn thing.
You've got other things to work on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just go, yeah, I think I know what's going on here. Done.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep. Totally agree.